All right. Well, we are live here. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. We are so excited that you are here watching another CE National Digital Lab. I have with me today Sean and Melissa Spoelstra. If you're not familiar with me yet, my name is Eric Miller, and I am the Director of Ministry Operations with CE National. Today, we are diving into part two of a conversation we started a few weeks ago with Andrew and Ashton Wood. Sean is drinking out of the mug that he got at their wedding. So Andrew and Sean are both Canadian, so we may have to do a third one of these digital labs now to have some American men on this instead of just the ladies. But we're excited about having the Spoelstras on for this conversation as we talk about how do you balance family and ministry. If you are in full-time ministry or even part-time ministry, and you have a family, you know how difficult this can be. There are different seasons. There's sometimes it feels like balance in this regard is a myth. Does it even exist? So we're going to talk about that today. We've got the Spoelstras who are a little later in life. They have experienced more ministry than Andrew and Ashton. They have their kids are grown, so they won't have a little one or the dog interrupting. So we love that. That was a perfect analogy with Ashton in the last video. As we're working from home, and my dog was just here, my kids are here, so that may happen to me. I better be careful here. So as we dive in, I just want to introduce Sean and Melissa, and I'll let you guys kind of share some of the details. But Sean, as I mentioned, you were born and raised in Ontario, Canada. I understand you met Melissa at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. It's a great school. I did my master's there. They both earned a Bible in theology degree, and they've been in full-time ministry together as a couple for 25 years. Did you say 25th anniversary is coming up?
Next month, September 9th, yep.
That's awesome. Congrats. So Sean is currently the campus pastor at the Pickering campus of Grace Fellowship Church there in Ohio. Melissa is the women's conference speaker, though not at the moment since there aren't any conferences. We're bummed about that. But she writes curriculum and is an author, a Bible study teacher and leader. She's written 7 Bible studies and 4 books. Together they have 4 adult children. And so we're excited to have them on this conversation. Really, our goal is to help equip families who are trying to live in this balance of ministry and family. And this is tough. It's really tough. So being in ministry, it's not the typical 9-to-5 kind of job. And so life happens, family happens. So let's dive in. Let's talk about this a little bit here. Why don't you guys just briefly explain your story, how you guys met, even your upbringing, family dynamics, and then go a little deeper on kind of your current ministry involvement for me.
Sure, yeah. I'll start, and then Melissa can fill in things I either forget or she wants to add. But yeah, born and raised in Canada in really a very traditional church setting, and ended up going to some great Bible colleges and ended up at Moody, like you said. And I think we actually might have been in line together on the very first day of school at Moody, which is crazy. But we didn't start dating until our my second semester senior year, and kind of ended our time at Moody together. But we met, dated, and got engaged in downtown Chicago, so that kind of holds a special place for us. We've been back numerous times for anniversaries or trips. And yeah, this is how you bring a Canadian and an American together. You kind of meet somewhere in the middle, and Bible college makes those things happen. We both had a heart for ministry, and it's been really kind of a neat journey for us. I mean, we got married, and 9 days later, I started as a youth pastor in a little Baptist church, actually, in Canada, and did that for just over 2.5 years, and then got a call to come down here to Columbus to work at Grace Church in Powell with Rick Newsom, greatest mentor in my life, known him for, almost 30 years now. And I had the privilege of working on staff at Grace Church in Powell for 10 years as a family pastor. Then they sent me to plant a church, which was very exciting to get to do. And I did that in Dublin, where we lived, and did that for 10 years, called Encounter Church. And then Grace Fellowship reached out to me and said, hey, we have a position that may fit your gift mix, and we're looking for a campus pastor. And what's kind of unique about what I do at Grace Fellowship is that Pastor Keith Manier is the lead pastor, and he's there, but the campus is quite large. And so I came in originally as the chief shepherd, but we changed the name to campus pastor. So I'm a little bit of a unique individual, because there's other campuses we have, and those campus pastors do different roles and oversee staffs and budgets. But I really just press in relationally to people, a lot of light counseling, weddings, funerals, and getting together with people who are members. And yeah, it's a real privilege to be able to do that.
Awesome. Very cool. So
Awesome.
Melissa, yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you get to do.
So I grew up in Texas, and I think what's kind of interesting for both Sean and I is neither one of us grew up in a ministry family. I mean, both of our parents were believers, and certainly we went to church. Wow, there's a fly in here. That's fun. But neither one of us had like pastor dads or, were pastors' kids. So it's been unique to then be on the other end of that with our own kids, because they are pastors' kids and have lived kind of a little bit more of a fishbowl life than either one of us experienced growing up. But yeah, went to the Moody Bible Institute. Oh my gosh. Pursuing Christian education, and eventually changed my major to Bible theology. And so got that degree and married Sean right out of Moody and took that whole trip he just talked about right alongside him.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome. And now explain to us a little bit about your role in what you get to do within your ministry context. I understand you are contributing for the Proverbs 31. Is it the First 5 app? And then is it Girlfriends in God, their devotional?
Right. Yeah. So certainly early on in ministry, it was more just mainly being a mom and taking care of the kids and having that kind of be my central role, and coming alongside Sean in ministry when I could, when that worked out. But definitely whatever ministry I was involved in was more definitely alongside with Sean. But really about maybe 7-8 years ago, that started to change a little bit, just as I started to focus on writing and things like that. And that was more in the women's area. And so that's been different. That's been a unique season. That's one of the things Sean and I were saying about how when it comes to balancing family and ministry, so much of it is about what season you're in. And so there have been a lot of different ones. And now the ministry stuff that I do is more disconnected from the church ministry that Sean's involved in his role as a pastor.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that you're both working in full-time capacity, and yet the dynamics of what those hours look like are probably very different. I'm sure you're between having people call you at all hours of the day or night and needing to be in response to that, and yet having deadlines and things that you have to get done, and balancing that with family dynamics and spending time together as your kids are away and heading off to college, and yet wanting to spend time together. So kind of speak into what are some of the learning curves for you guys as you went through those early years in your marriage? How did you guys learn to have balance? What was that process like?
I would tell you the very beginning of our marriage, like I hear this often, that people say their first year of marriage is their hardest. And that wasn't the case for us. We had a great first year of marriage. I was a youth pastor. We did all these things together with the kids, but we got pregnant very early in marriage, and 14 months of marriage, and Zach, our oldest, was born. And that second year actually became really pretty difficult for me emotionally, because I was like, shoot, I just lost my right arm in ministry, and we did all these things together. There's all these girls in the youth group, and I'm hanging with the guys. And so that was really, like I say, perhaps 25 years ago. That's a long time ago. Then we had the fog, and Melissa can speak into this if she wants to, but I always jokingly tell young families, hey, when your kids can wipe, buckle, and dress themselves, that you come out of this fog, because there's so much physical work as a parent and discipline and all that comes with that. And I feel bad for young moms, because it is, and especially if they stay at home. And that was the traditional route that we took. And I was gone at times, and I would come back in and help when I could, and failed at that off and on for sure. And so it is kind of unique to be in the season of life we are now, where we feel freed up. We have a little bit more experience under our belts. And frankly, with Melissa, she has more deadlines than I do when it comes to writing different articles and magazine things, and her Bible studies and all that comes with that. And I think she feels probably, I'll speak for her for a moment, but I think it's probably she feels a little bit less mom guilt because the kids aren't around, so she can get more work done, and I'm gone, 9 to 5 or longer, and so it's a little less tenuous. I can think of a time when the kids, we risked doing a 360 evaluation one time. We read a book together and we had our kids do this 360 evaluation on our parenting. And one of the things that came out was, you spend too much time on your laptop, right? To both of us. And we're like, oh, we feel guilty.
It was like on a scale of 1 to 5 for each kid to sit down and say, if I really needed dad, but he was really busy at work, on a scale of 1 to 5, how available would he be to me? So that we could get kind of from their perspective, how they viewed, how committed we were to them, and then to be able to address some of those things. But I was just going to say that when you talk about the learning curve, I think for us, the biggest one was just the first child entering in, because, when you're dating or even in your early stages of marriage, depending on how long you're married before you have children, it's you and me against the world, and you have all the time in the world to help each other. Maybe you have a job or different things, but there's not, your singular focus is on each other and on ministry. But then when this little very needy human enters the scene and you're needing to be prepared, and I think this is particularly challenging for moms, because that baby becomes the center of your universe. And I know for us, it was a very rude interruption to a very pretty good pattern and rhythm. And all of a sudden, my focus is probably over focused on this little new human life. And we're trying to figure out how to navigate this at home, and then to say, what does this look like for our family and ministry together? And that only as you add more children. I mean, we went from 1 to 3. We found out we were having twins 10 days before we had them. So that was quite a shock for us. But I remember when we found out we're having twins, I was kind of freaking out, because we had kind of weathered our son was 3.5 at that time. And it was a huge adjustment for us to learn to communicate, to learn to set boundaries with ministry, for me to not be so focused on the child that I lost sight of marriage and ministry. And I feel like we, in those 3.5 years, had come so far. And then to find out we were having twins, I was like, oh no, it's going to happen again. And so we really did try to communicate a lot better about how Sean could help and what kind of expectations we could have. And I think it really went so much better than even because even though it being 2 babies, it still wasn't as bad as just the one, because we were a little bit more prepared and a little bit more seasoned and knew what to expect. And I think that's part of the learning curve, is just, you can read all the books and talk all the day long about it, but all of a sudden, I don't know what it was like for you, Eric, when first baby came home, but people say, what's the hardest, 1 to 2, 2 to 3? And I'm like, well, we went 1 to 3, but I would still say 0 to 1 is the biggest adjustment you make in family ministry.
Yeah. 10 days. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That would be the fact that you were mildly freaking out. I think we would be breathing into it.
We have things that run in our family. So, identicals aren't hereditary. So it was a shock.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's, for me, I look at it where my wife and I met 10 years into my being in full-time ministry. So I already had developed patterns and routines and bad habits of, lack of discipline, because I was single and doing youth ministry at the time. Like
totally.
There were no boundaries. There was no balance. There was no need for any of that. And so, then getting married, our first year of marriage actually was, I think, similar to you guys, very good. We just enjoyed getting to be with each other and spend time together, and we could go wherever we wanted and do whatever we wanted. And then it was like, once we had our son, it was like those glaring weaknesses became magnified for sure. So yeah, I think when you add kids into the mix, it definitely can add a layer of complication. But Melissa, I loved what you just said of needing to communicate. That I think is so imperative. And sometimes when the transition gets fast and furious and your life is still flying 100 miles an hour and you feel the needs of the people that you're doing ministry with as well, it often can feel like your own personal needs or your family needs get backburnered. Is that, would you guys say that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I want to jump in and say I want to own some of my own failure, because I would be a guy, even as a teenager, thinking the idea of having a family and children, it was so great. And then all of a sudden we had, children, and I did not have the intuitiveness on what to do. And I'll tell you, there was years of our marriage, years of failure on my behalf of not serving my family appropriately, where I would do things I thought were helpful. And Melissa and I have this little joking thing that we say from A Bug's Life: help, don't help. Sometimes my helpfulness wasn't helping what she really needed.
Well, this is why communication is so important, right?
It
is that, he would come home, and because we love to,
hospitality
is our thing, right? We love to have people over, but when there's 4 little kids at home and I'm trying to get dinner, and he would slide in right at the 11th hour when the company was arriving. And so we communicated, hey, I need you to actually get home on time on the nights we're having people for company, because I need a little help. And so the one night I heard his car pull in, or his Jeep pull in, and I was like, where is he? And he finally comes up and he's like, oh, I shoveled the ashes out of the fireplace. And I was like, I don't feel like they're going to look in there. I don't feel like that was priority number 1, and we've joked about that since. But what Sean has done, and this is part of the learning curve, is he's asked me, what would be helpful to you in this moment? And even especially when babies were coming, I remember when I was pregnant with the twins. And I think this is a big mistake that I made and that moms make, is that we expect dads to be moms. Yeah. Dads are not moms. Dads don't intuitively know, I should check the baby's diaper. I should see if there's clothes in the washing machine. Maybe they need to go into the dryer. And so I wrote those out for Sean right before we had the twins.
Original honey-do list.
You could do, and it was posted on the fridge, to help. Check the dirty laundry and see if any needs to be done. Look and see if we have milk and bread. If we don't, go buy some, like those things that I think sometimes moms are like, well, intuitively they should know all these things, but they don't, because they're not moms and they're not supposed to be. And so that communication of just asking, and then Sean had to be of a mindset to receive that, of doing those kind of things that are sometimes mom things, but moms need help when kids are little and family responsibilities are heavy.
I'm so glad you said that, because it's as if you guys have been like hiding in our closet for the past 5 years. That's so accurate. And Sean, that question of what can I do to help is a gold mine, right? So any men that are watching this, write that one down. What can I do to help? And learn the specific thing rather than trying to read their mind, shoveling the ashes. I love that. That's hilarious. I've had those moments. I've messed that up. Yes.
It's a true story. And I'll say this, Eric, it's not like I came up with some of these things on my own. I mean, Rick Newsom and other men who were my mentors spoke into my life about servant leadership. And, it's interesting. I just had a counseling appointment yesterday with a man, and I told him that story about the ashes and about my knuckleheadedness and my early years of marriage. And just the idea of Rick and others casting a vision to be a servant leader. Ephesians 5 says to husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and wives, respect your husbands. It's amazing to me the Bible does not say there, and Paul doesn't say wives love your husbands. Wives love that's intuitive to them, but they need to respect their husbands. But not that we have to earn their respect and that to get it. But still, if we loved our wives the way the vision has been cast biblically for us to do, how could wives not respect us? Because we'd be laying down our lives for them. We'd be laying down our lives for our families. And so others spoke into my life. I can remember, again, the twins had just been born. Zach is like 3.5. And we got Mondays off. And where I lived was in Dublin, but then Powell had a golf course that gave pastors free golfing on Mondays. And that was my day off. So on Monday, my day off, I'd go golf for 4 hours with a couple of the other pastors who were later in life than me. Yeah. And then eventually Rick comes alongside and just gently asks some questions.
I may have spoken to his wife a little bit about this golfing.
Perhaps there's someone telling on, but it's good. Sean, you think maybe you want to be home on the only day you're home all day? And you think 4 hours is the best investment in time into your own life. And
I think that's something that is unique to a pastor situation. Typically there is a day off, and it's during the week because the weekends are so heavy.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be communication about the day off, because if the pastor goes, well, that's my day off, I can go golf, right. I can go read. When is mom's day off? Yep. And now that's a moot point for us. We're at the issue where no one needs a diaper, no one needs, all of these, it truly can be a day off for him and a day off for us at a stage now. So I just want to cast the vision of hope for so many of you with littles, that there's a day coming where things will look very different than they do when you're in the throes of parenting. But when you're in the throes of it, you have to be really intentional about what the expectation is for the day off, and working together on that.
In all the weddings I do over the years, I really cast a vision for the couples I do premarital counseling with to be team, whatever their last name is, team Spoelstra, team Miller for you guys. And part of team is communication and being for that other person. And how can I help with that other person and be, just lay down my life.
And I think you also have to recognize when you come to an impasse, especially when it comes to do with your kids. And, people had told us bigger kids, bigger problems. And we're like, no way, this baby phase is so hard, but it's bigger in a different way. And so there were times, especially in our parenting, that, we say Gottman says, solve your solvable problems, but overcome gridlock when you're stuck. And for us, when we hit gridlock, we would go see a counselor. We would pay the money when our budget was very small to go meet with someone, because gridlock can cause resentment and isolation and separation. And so, our biggest conflicts were usually revolving around parenting, about what to do about a teenager, how they rebelled, and what was our game plan. And Sean and I think it's pretty typical. Usually there's one parent, and it's not always a certain gender, that leans toward law, and another parent that leans toward grace. And that's a great thing, because then there'll be some balance that will come. But when you have a parent that leans toward law and one that leans toward grace, and you're trying to parent kids and there's no real manual, you're trying to apply scripture and you're reading parenting books, but your situations are unique. So I would just say, I think one of the best things we did looking back, and probably could have even done more, is when we got to gridlock, going and getting help to talk through and work through with the third party.
That book is called 7 Principles to Making Marriage Work. Is that right, honey?
By John Gottman. Mm-hmm. John Gottman. That's a good one. And he's the one who says about the solvable problems in gridlock.
Yep. That's awesome. Yeah. So let's do this. Let's fast forward a little bit for our viewers who are watching, where maybe they've successfully made it out of the diaper stage and their kids are older. Congratulations. I'm so jealous of that, as my daughter is napping while we do this call, so we got to hurry. I think it's share some of the, if you're willing, some of the struggles now where you're approaching empty nest, the kids are out of the house. What does balance look like now? And are there still struggles, or is it just, hey, everything is amazing?
Do you want to tackle that first, babe?
Everything is not always amazing, because I'm a sinner and so is Melissa, and we had 4 sinnerlings, right? So there's a hotbed of that. It's funny that they're all gone now, but a pandemic happened, if anyone didn't know that, and we had them all come back, right? So this last couple months have been quite interesting when it comes to all of that. But right now, they're all going back to where they're going. I'd like Melissa to answer this question first. I think she's got some.
So you're asking what the biggest challenges are for balancing family and ministry now. I will say it is easier. It's way easier than it was. We had to be so proactive and intentional. And I just want to brag on a couple fun things that Sean did that I think helped to get us to this point for it to be easier now. I think of him doing something called dime time, where he would get this little card and put a dime on it, and he gave it to our girls and said, he could always be 10 minutes late for anything if he needed to. So if they needed dad, they could just bring him a dime, and it meant that they needed 10 minutes of undivided attention. Thought that was really creative, spoke love to them, and it's something they'll always remember that he did. I think of a counselor, recommending to Sean, because reentry into the home when you have middle school, high schoolers, even littles, can be really hard for a pastor, because they've just left a heavy counseling meeting or a stressful, situation with someone, and they're going to re-enter into the home. And the counselor told Sean to pull over on the side of the road and spend 10 minutes preparing himself to enter, to say, what kind of an attitude do I want to come in? What kind of a dad do I? And I mean, that made huge change in some dynamics that we were experiencing, because it's the witching hour from 4 to 6, right? I'm trying to make dinner, kids are trying to do homework, life is crazy, and then in comes dad, and he can either be a calming force or he can not be a calming force. And so I think that was huge. We did Friday family fun nights. We did not plan anything ministry on Friday nights. We had pizza and watched movies and played games and just did stuff with our kids on Friday nights for many, many, many years. And I feel like that was a good deposit. The other thing I was going to say was media-free Sundays. That's been such a challenge in parenting, is tackling the media. And we have not done it perfectly. We've made so many mistakes. I look back and it just was changing as we were going. But one thing we did was we put away phones and laptops on Sundays and took walks, took naps, spent time, ate a meal together, sometimes had other families over. And I feel like that helped us get to where we are right now with a little bit more balance, all of those inputs. But now it's more like making sure we get a date in. It's the stress of the last teenager at home and trying to make those kind of decisions on a united front together. It's my traveling schedule and making sure that I'm around. I know last year our daughter was a cheerleader, and Sean was having to sit at a lot of games alone because I was out of town. And so trying to balance how we manage our yeses and nos. In fact, I think was it last Christmas or the Christmas before last, actually, that Sean asked me to change my travel schedule to be home more because our last daughter was still at home. And we had to talk through that. And so I think in the past, it's been more the conversation about Sean pulling back from ministry. But then I would say of recent, it's been more of a conversation of me pulling back in some areas to still be that role model. And you called our kids adults. I mean, Sean, did you chuckle inside when you called our kids adults? Like, yes, they're 18 to 23 and we love them dearly, but there's still a lot of socks on the floor and irresponsible decisions, and it's definitely not utopia going on over here. But the challenges are not near what they were in the past when it comes to balancing family, and so much of it is more of a joy. Would you say that, babe? That the parenting our college age kids is such a joy compared to all of those years of heavy discipline.
I would want to add to, because you just made me think of this, babe. There is hope in consistent parenting. And I would say for Melissa and I, when we're both, just being very frank, when we're both walking in step with the Lord, when we're both spirit-filled, as a couple, we're unstoppable. But it's when one of us gets prideful, one of us, is tired and speaks out of turn, whatever it is. These things happen all the time, and it demands us to come back and make things right. The power of forgiveness, the power of when your relationship with your kids does go sideways, it's not over. They, intrinsically, they want relationship with you as a parent, and you always have the opportunity to make things right. But it's going to come with humility on your part as a parent, to actually get on your knee, get eye to eye with your child and say, I'm so sorry that I said that. Will you please forgive me? And literally handing a child the power to not forgive you. And what child do you know doesn't forgive? They want to forgive you when they're little, even when they get older. Again, when they're teenagers, maybe the rolled eyes and some of those things. But you can always make your relationships right. And I think sometimes people get hopeless because they think, oh, this happened and now it's the roadblock forever. That's just not true. But pride and those other things just creep in, and I think that's a roadblock to our relationships.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you guys for being willing to share all that and be vulnerable with us. I think it is challenging regardless whatever season you're in. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be challenges. So as you think about your family dynamics, what's been, looking back, right, over the last 25 years, what's been the biggest challenge within your family dynamic that can then be an obstacle at times to your ministry?
Yeah,
we'll go the other way too with the next question. But
yeah, I would have to own the fact that anger in my life, anger at being disrespected by my children, just frustrated. I mean, I'm practically an expert at seeing things that are out of place or wrong. Why isn't the cupboard shut? Why are the shoes messed up on the floor? Why isn't the backpack? I mean, I've clearly communicated what needs to happen. And I own the fact that I'm the more unmerciful and consistent, where Melissa is the more merciful and inconsistent. And this has been over the whole course of our marriage. I remember my stepfather saying this, Hank. He would say, it's either going to be sex, kids, or money, the three biggies that are going to be a problem in your marriage. And for us, it's our parenting. It's me thinking I know what's right, regardless of Melissa's thoughts or emotions, or us agreeing on something and then me circumventing that a little bit, or I feel like an exception has come up or whatever. And I feel like now we're in a space where we're so much more in tune, because it's forced our communication. But I would say early on, we go back to the intrinsic not remembering how to change, the thinking of changing diapers and those things, but it also rolled into just parenting skills, period, and how to discipline.
Well, and anger isn't always just spewing, right? There's stuffers, spewers, and leakers. I mean, anger is a problem for everyone, whether they ever raise their voice or not. And I think it is very hard to teach, to mentor, to do anything ministry with unresolved anger. And so when family situations brought up anger, I think that's the question you were asking, what has inhibited ministry? And I think it is so vital that pastors and their wives and their families learn to deal with anger in whatever shape or form that comes, for you.
Because there's pressures at the workplace, we call it ministry, but it's our workplace. It's what we find value in, but there's plenty of weight. I mean, yesterday in that counseling appointment I had, it was draining for me. And I feel like I spoke some great things into this person's life and pointed them to Christ and back to reconciliation with his wife. But, I walk away from that and I'm not filled by counseling. I'm typically drained by it, but I want to step into those spaces. And then, after a long day, you come home, and for me, I think that practical advice that I received of stopping before you get home, especially when you're in the crucible of lots of ministry and little kids and that frenetic time for your wives between 4 and 6, that hour Melissa was saying, getting things ready, it was really practical for me to just stop and kind of just honestly center myself on Christ and my role as a servant leader, and to go, I don't know what the day my wife has had or my children have had. Step in and be a leader. Don't make it about yourself, Sean. Don't expect to walk in the door and everyone's happy you're home, because who knows what they've had to deal with. And home is a retreat for all of us, but I should, as a leader, be first and foremost concentrated on their emotions, their thoughts. How can I step in and help them? And for so long, I didn't, I'd come in and I would be literally mumbling or frustrated or, I'm embarrassed to say, if you ask my children probably what it was like for their elementary years, they probably would have thought my dad was frustrated with me, was disappointed in me at times. And we affirmed our kids with love, with words, and we hugged them and spent time with them. But there was definitely an element of my life where I went to a counselor privately, personally, and then Melissa and I would go for our marriage at times, and we'd go for our parenting. I mean, there is wisdom in a multitude of counselors, and we needed help.
Yeah. I love that you're sharing that, because it's easy to sometimes bring your work home with you and have that be a negative impact. And yet, when your family dynamics are rough and your parenting, as you're sharing, can be frustrating, that sometimes can get carried into your work life as well, where it affects your ministry, and you may not be able to relate as well with the people that you're wanting to, or as a pastor, at times we feel hypocritical, and the enemy can get in there and really affect that and cause division and cause lack our identity or security and all that. So we have to guard that on both sides. Yeah. Thank you,
Melissa, believing in me and speaking into my life and not rejecting me, and there was times of that, of course, too, but wanting the best for me. And this is going back to the whole Team Spoelstra kind of concept. I want the best for her in her speaking and writing and the things that she's doing now that we have our kids older, and she wants the best for me. And when we act that way, when we're in, speaking that into each other's lives, it's emboldening. It's so helpful.
So you guys kind of already touched on this, and maybe part of it is still true, but on the flip side of that question, then what's been the biggest obstacle to overcome in your ministry that tends to hinder your family dynamics?
So we did talk about this a little bit, babe. We were talking about discernment. Yep. Especially when Sean was a lead pastor, church planter for those 10 years, people will call at all hours, all the time, about various and sundry things. And so to have the discernment, I mean, I can think of us being at our girls' softball game when they were in elementary school, and someone calling and saying they really needed him. And he went over, and the emergency was his wife was feeling left out at church. Like, it's one of those things that's like, okay. Then there are other times when someone died or their marriage was in crisis and he did need to go. But there were other times where it was like, maybe I should have asked a few more questions about what this emergency really is, because, with our kids, we were like, if there's no blood, then it's not an emergency, So I think that has been, I don't know, Sean, if you would speak more to that, but the biggest obstacle was trying to, people will cheer you up and spit you out and want you all the time. And so to discern that.
Yeah, our job is not 9 to 5. There's elements to it that are, but we want to be as shepherds available to our sheep, as we are the under shepherd to this great shepherd, the good shepherd. But we do need that discernment. And there is, again, if we go back to the words you said at the very beginning, Eric, about seasons, it's either seasons or it's like Melissa said, discerning in the moment. I mean, there's times where, someone in our church passed away, and it was an emergency, and emergencies take
everything
for everything. I think it was striking for me to read the book Choosing to Cheat. Great title. It's an Andy Stanley book I read years ago, but it's either, basically the whole book can be boiled down in like 2 sentences. You're either going to cheat your family or you're going to cheat your work, and in the end, it's like, well, cheat your work because your family's the priority as far as the nuclear shepherding of who you are. And we tell dads who are working on, in any, as bankers or lawyers or doctors or on some sort of a line in a factory, that their chief ministry is their family. But then we sometimes as pastors act like our main ministry is the church and the people there. But no, it still boils down to our nuclear family first. And I'm a follower of Jesus as an individual. So is Melissa. Then we come together. Then we got this little family. We work with it. And then you go out kind of in the concentric circles. But we do it. Figuring that out. I would just have to, again, let me own another thing. We at Grace Church in Powell did a big conference for us, at least, putting this thing on. It was called Advance, and it was a biblical manhood and womanhood. And, we're trying to do this great thing about what does biblical manhood look like? What does biblical womanhood look like? It was probably one of the worst periods of time in 25 years in our marriage because of how much time it took for me to help plan, because I was in charge of the whole thing. Melissa couldn't stand me. And we're talking about biblical manhood and womanhood. Like, what's wrong with this picture, right? And we have to co-teach a seminar together. Oh, man, was that difficult, So figuring out our priorities is, and it is, you need the Holy Spirit's discernment and a forgiving wife.
Yeah, I remember multiple people speaking into my life and saying, if you don't shepherd and lead your family well, your ministry will dissolve. And
you wonder why Paul's standards for in 1 Timothy 3 say, if you can't take care of your family, what the heck are you working in a church for, baby? Sean's words, but it's kind of important.
Yep, that's really.
And your reputation in the world too. Isn't that interesting that all that gets included? The Bible's an amazing book to tell us that. It isn't just, hey, you do stuff spiritually and that's really important. No, it's in the church setting. It's home and it's your reputation out in the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you guys really kind of already answered another one of my questions, which was, what are some things that you've done to implement or that you've implemented to better help that balance family and ministry? And so I love the things that you shared of, well, on this day of the week, we're going to have dinner together. On Fridays, we're going to have family time. And on Sunday, anything else that maybe you'd add to that as you're thinking that through, or maybe something you'd recommend that, for a young family or somebody in ministry just to guard and protect that time?
I would add, because Melissa did say, some great things, but I would add this here, there is, it's like a misnomer in a way in ministry. Like I know we kind of feel like we're in a glass house. I've never said to my children, you got to act a certain way because you're because you're the pastor's son or daughter, but they already feel that. Mm-hmm. But then there's this idea. We went to a conference years ago and a pastor cast a vision and someone asked him a question just like you just did. And in a huge room, he said, I look back now, and he was as old as I am or older, saying, I wish I had been a little bit more extravagant with my family. I think we feel like as pastors, we have to, I don't know, either have the worst car.
Scarcity mentality of we can't go out to eat, or we have to stick so strictly to the budget. And he definitely wasn't saying blow your budget out. He was just talking about your posture towards your family.
So how can you bless your family? So I would say there is something very special about guarding your time on a vacation. actually having a vacation as a family. And then I would go beyond that for a marriage. I mean, a successful couple will work together as a team to have and to successfully raise their children. So I would always jokingly say we have vacation and then we have real vacation. Vacation was take your kids somewhere. We did a big out west trip and other things, but you still got to pay for your kids and parent your kids during that time. Real vacation to Sean was just me with my wife, my best friend, and it's just the two of us, two adults that actually like each other and are for each other, and not all the other immaturity sometimes, you know. And so I would say guard that time. Not that we've done it perfectly, but we have shot to or had a goal to go at least on a weekend away, at least 2 days every year. It doesn't happen every year, but we try to do that.
We do.
As a couple.
And I would just add to that nighttime routines with our kids.
Yeah.
I just think that's such a tender moment with kids, even when they're small, but just to share with them, either read a Bible story with them or share with them something God is teaching us, and then to take that time to teach them to pray and to pray with them. I can think of those being just really key moments for us. Either sometimes both of us would do it, sometimes one of us would do it, and we never wanted to do it. I'm going to be honest. I want to eat ice cream and watch Netflix at night. Like after 9 p.m. or 8 p.m., I just don't even want to do the thing anymore. I'm just done. I want to check out. But we found that if you push past that not wanting to, and you enter in and do the thing that literally takes 5 minutes, you walk out the door and go, why do I not want to do this? That was so sweet, or that was so good. But then the next night you don't want to do it again. Like there is something that is this discipline of that nighttime routine with kids that I look back on and am so grateful that we pressed hard in on that.
I'd also want to add that to cast hope for parents who are in the fray and the throes of all that busyness, because, you know, this may not be everyone's story, but we had particularly difficulty with our twins. That rocked our world as parents, and for many reasons, you know. And then we had a fourth child after that, right? You know, 2 in diapers, and then our fourth child comes along. We had 3 in diapers. It was a crazy time. Lots of discipline, lots of training, going back to the same thing over and over again. But I would just say this, our twins went to college. One's at Moody Bible Institute, our alma mater. One goes to University of Cincinnati. And independently, the 2 of them called me at one point, and maybe they spoke to Melissa too, but they thanked me for things that we had done. I think they went to college, and either their roommates or people that they had been hanging around as friends had such wrecked home lives, because statistically most, you know, it's 50% or more the divorce rate and difficulties. And they literally recognized, I thought it would be like 5 or 10 years down the line, but it was their first semester freshman year that they saw other families. And basically you can't help but compare what your experience was with other people's that you hear. And they really affirmed our parenting. Not that we were perfect. And that really made me feel good, because I feel like I've had a throw of mistakes and failures along the way, with some successes too. But so I'm just saying there is hope. Your kids will grow up and they'll look back and they'll remember a dime for daddy's time, or making pancakes on Saturday morning, or the family Friday fun nights, or the trip that you took here and there. I mean, you only have so much time to lock in memories and spiritual rhythms in your kids' lives, and then they get to choose themselves. I mean, we raise them to send them. We don't raise them to keep them. Yeah. So, and parenting doesn't end. I mean, they're growing up into adults, but parenting doesn't end. We actually, Melissa, I love her statement. We go from authority to advisor. And
I love being an advisor so much more than being an authority.
And mentally for me, that's really helpful, because we have one at home that's turning 18 in like a week and a half. And while she's still under our roof, she's under our authority, but she has 3 siblings ahead of her, and she's dying to be in their stage of life. But she's not yet. And this is where we are continuing to be the authority in her life until we send her off.
Good. Yeah, that's very good. I love Sean, you have vacation and then you have real vacation. I'm dying for a real vacation. I'm gonna say that to my wife. That's good.
And get friends to help babysit for you, or family. Her family was in Texas. Mine was in Canada. I mean, in 25 years, I think my mom came 1 weekend to watch our kids. I think her mom came twice.
That's where the pastor perks come in. Come on. There's so many amazing people that surrounded our family and became like family to us.
True. Yeah.
And we would reciprocate. We had friends that had 4 kids. Their kids would stay at our house and they'd go on a vacation, and vice versa. And, we're almost at the stage. I mean, Melissa and I can taste it in the sense of when Rachel goes off to school next fall, we can go to vacation and nobody's at our house that we got to worry about that's doing something they shouldn't be doing or whatever. I mean, that's so tangible right now for us.
Love it. I love it. So as we kind of wind down here, well, give us like, our viewers, what's one piece of advice that you wish somebody had told you guys before you got married, or maybe they did tell you before you got married that was so helpful and you used and implemented in keeping priorities straight and figuring out, what balancing ministry and family looks like? It's a tough one.
Well, I feel like I've already said a couple of those things. I mean, there's nothing like the power of forgiveness. You're going to offend each other. You're going to have conflict. A conflict-free marriage, I don't understand. When I hear people who've been together for 10 years and they say they've never had an argument, I go, I don't know how that's possible. You must just both give up or retreat all the time. There's going to be conflict. It is germane to humanity. And so the power of forgiveness and humility.
I would just say, looking back for me, what I wish I'd maybe known early on is just how different people really are. I feel like in this, that it's so easy to get in a win-lose situation or to think my way's right and their way's wrong. And I do think this generation is so much more self-aware. They know their Enneagram number. They know where they're at on the Myers-Briggs. They know their tendencies. And I wish I would have understood better earlier on, not wrong, just different. Because I think Sean and I are both very strong personalities and we were raised very differently. And we, just tended to dig in a lot. And there was way too much win-lose in the beginning. And I feel like we've learned over 2 decades how to get to win-win and to support each other and recognize, oh, that's not wrong. He just really is a 7. Everything just really has to be fun, And I think Sean's had to understand some of my drive as a 3 of a need to produce. And it's just the way God uniquely made me. And I can appreciate now so much Sean's wonder. He has so much wonder and he's so much fun. But I was always trying to make him driven like me because that's how I thought people should be. So I just wish that I'd understood more just how different people are and to appreciate those differences as opposed to let them divide you because they can.
Yeah, that's really good. Imagine if you were both 7s. my wife and
no
I.
No bills would ever be paid.
Yeah,
we'd have a lot of fun.
It's funny because Bethany and I actually are both 7s, and yet it plays out in very different ways. So it is kind of fun at times, but there with that comes very challenging moments too. So I love that. It's not, one is not right and the other is not wrong. It's just different. That's such a good phrase. Yeah. So maybe as we wind up, I'll give you this one last question. I think for the viewers who are watching that maybe they are in that season of frustration, they're discouraged, they feel like they're losing this battle of balancing ministry and family. They're burnout in one area or the other. Their ministry is neglected, maybe their family's neglected. What encouragement would you give them of where to start or something to do to help kind of just break that cycle?
Mm-hmm. 2 things come to mind for me. The first is to not neglect your own personal time with God. It's such a basic thing, but just Melissa talks about my wonder, and I'm like, yeah, I love to walk outside. I loved going to the zoo when we had a membership and going, God, you are so creative. You're so amazing. And having a living, breathing, personal, one-on-one relationship with God. I mean, as pastors, we pour our lives out for other people, but if we're not filling ourselves, how can we, it's like you can't give what you don't have in a sense. We can fake it for a long time, it seems. And then we burn out and get frustrated or, I can't stand these people. It's us versus them. What a terrible attitude to have. And I've seen people with that attitude in ministry. So you're not neglecting that is just huge. Yeah.
And I think I would just say, just to keep talking. I think the biggest danger is that you just withdraw and give up and let resentment form and bitterness come. So to just keep talking, keep being honest, like really honest about how things are and about how you're doing. and then seeking help when you need it. I know we've talked about that, but we've done it a lot. And sometimes that was professional help that we paid for. And sometimes that was just really good mentors who were down the road from us. And sometimes it was just us independently reaching out, and sometimes us reaching out as a couple. And that means that you have to expose yourself. Like I remember when Sean was on staff at Grace Powell, and he's like, I'm going to go talk to Rick. And I'm like, are you sure you want to tell Rick all this? You might get fired, and he was like, no, I'm willing to expose this. Like, I'm willing to put it out there. And that was sometimes hard for me to say, oh, he's right. We are really struggling. And it's okay if the world knows that we don't have it all together and that we need help too.
Yeah. I mean, we're meant to live in community, Eric, and I don't know why pastors maybe don't. I mean, I've heard pastors say, I don't have any friends, or I can't let people in to my real thoughts. And I think, whether it's like your own small group or grace group or whatever you call that is healthy as you lead them or in them. I found it really healthy to spend time with with other evangelical pastors in whatever community I was in, to be able to say, hey, here's people that do what I do. We kind of know what's going on. I mean, how many times have I sat in a grace group and the guys are talking about, I'm thinking about a job change or shift. And like we as pastors can say that out loud in our groups, right? That's like a big no-no. Who can we talk to about what's going on and the pressures we feel? So finding literally a friend. I mean, your spouse is it, but Melissa can't meet all my needs and I can't meet all of hers. I need a guy who I can look up to, and having a mentor, but being one and having friends. I mean, this whole our whole Christian life is meant to be relationships, first with the Lord and then truly with people, and being real.
Yeah, that's so important. I think that's huge. So thank you guys. I appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, your authenticity in all of this. So I'm sure that somebody will be encouraged by this. Would you guys just be willing to close our time in prayer and pray for our viewers and whatever God leads you in and brings to your hearts?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to do that. God, I appreciate this time just to be able to share a little bit about what's Melissa and I's life has been like. Lord, it's not a life that's been separated from you. You've been deeply involved. And Lord, we're grateful for how you've spoken into our lives, Lord, from your word, from the circumstances we found ourselves in, from outside help from counselors, from friends, from mentors. And Lord, I do pray for those who have watched this today, that they might find some areas of being able to relate, but also, Lord, that your Spirit would work in their lives as you see fit. Lord, I pray for the men that are listening, that they would truly take the challenge of being servant leaders in their homes, or that they would, as what resonates for us as men so often, this idea of legacy and what are we leaving to the next generation and how important that is. Lord, for the wives, the women that are listening to this too, that they would see, Lord, how much you value them as daughters of the King of Kings, and Lord, what they do with children, what they do with their husbands, and what they do in their own personal ministry lives. Lord, there's so much out there. And I just pray too that we'd realize that there are seasons, and it's tough sometimes to work through either the mental or physical aspects of those seasons. But Lord, that we be encouraged that seasons come and then they eventually go, and then a new season begins. And Lord, as we've said already over and over, the idea of just being a team as a couple, especially, and there may be singles watching this too, and then the wonderful freedoms they have, Lord, to be able to make your kingdom mindset priority in their lives. But Lord, for husbands and wives, as they have mixed priorities, Lord, that they would continue to be a team to bring you glory in their home life, in their ministry life, and as they live in this culture. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.